On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody. I'm here with Joe Leo of the Arizona Diamondbacks organization. Joe, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. I am currently a minor league strength and conditioning coach with the Diamondbacks. I've been working out of the complex with our rookie team for the last 2 years, so been a lot of fun and excited to keep going with that. From the Chicagoland area and been in strength and conditioning for a couple of years now between interning and Diamondbacks, my first full-time job.
So tell me about the path to the Diamondbacks. You mentioned some interning and some things like that. So where did you start, and then how did your interest in baseball kind of come about?
Yeah, it's been a long journey, but a lot of fun and a lot of good mentors in between. So I in high school, I had a really good track coach, Coach Scott Nelson, one of the best coaches in Illinois track and field cross country history. He really inspired me to get into coaching in some way, shape, or form. You know, just the way he was a mentor and a leader for everyone. And, you know, he really made me believe in myself and held me accountable in ways that I didn't expect out of myself yet. So I just wanted to be like him, you know. And once I got to college, I went to, like you say, the Ohio State University. And in my freshman year, I kind of learned more about strength and conditioning. And then the summer of my sophomore year, I had my first internship in a gym downtown Chicago, private facility called Lift Chicago. I learned a lot about general S&C there, and there's a lot of really smart, good coaches there who are great people. You know, taught me how to interact as a professional and with clients and the day-to-day stuff. I did 2 summers there, and then after that, I started at OSU the fall of my senior year. I was working with some Olympic sports, track and field and swim dive to start. Again, had some really good mentors there and learned a lot. It was a much different setting and experience in the private sector. So I was really grateful to have that and learn a lot there. And then after that fall, I did a fall and a spring there. I went to Cressy Sports Performance in Florida for a summer, which really sparked my interest in baseball. One of the coaches at my first gym that I worked at, Lift, told me about Eric Cressy. I'd never heard about him before, and just seemed like he was onto some really cool stuff, a little bit different than traditional S&C that I was interested in. So really grateful to have interned down there. And again, smart coaches, great people, different perspective than I was used to. But after I did a summer there, I was like, baseball is, you know, what really drives me and something I want to get into. So fired off 100,000 LinkedIn messages that fall. And luckily, Derek Somerville with the Diamondbacks got back to me and started my internship with them after I graduated in the fall of 22 and interned and was hired from there. So
The Cressy tree is just crazy, man.
yeah.
So you were down in the Florida complex, so they had all the fields and everything to you. How many baseball players did you interact with while you were there? Probably hundreds.
Jeez. Yeah, they had it while I was there. It was mostly collegiate guys, a lot of high school kids too, a couple middle school kids, but there's a summer league going down there. So there's a lot. I mean, I'm trying to think. The beginning of the summer is really busy. There's 100, 200 people there over the course of the day, probably more than that, honestly. Different people coming and going. They do client evals, a bunch of them, especially at the beginning and the middle of the summer. So really worked on my people skills and working with different personalities. But yeah, hundreds of baseball players. And it's funny you say that because when I got down to Arizona for the Diamondbacks, I walked into the office and one of the guys I interned with, Wasey Crenshaw, was sitting in the office. I'm like, oh, hey again. So a couple of us have gone through that route in that internship, and we all had a good time, I think. So
Yeah, you're always like one or two people removed from somebody who either knows him or has interned for him or worked for him. So
Yeah.
kudos to him for building up what he has. We'll get to your job at the complex soon. But first, I always like to kick these off. What is your best professional baseball story so far? Either something that makes you laugh, something that you're proud of, just what has kind of stood out the most for you? And I'm sure it's probably, you probably have a lot of stories being in the complex, but what's the best one so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. Nothing too crazy, but I think just starting as an intern last winter and then getting a job and getting put with a team where I think 90% of the guys didn't speak English. It was a little bit of a culture shock. So learning how to build trust with those guys and learn a lot about myself as a coach and a person as well, and building those relationships as the year went on. There were two teams that year. Worked with all the guys, and the team had a really good year and went to the playoffs and the championship. It was just crazy thinking back on it, being in that dugout, banging them bat against the top of the dugout, making as much noise as possible and getting all wound up since there's not too many fans there. But guys got up for it. It was a lot of fun, and just kind of thinking back to where I started early on, kind of nervous and trying to find my way there to going nuts with these guys at the end of the season. I grew a lot, and I hope they grew a lot too. So it was a really cool year.
So you started as an intern with them, and then you went right to full time with the Diamondbacks, that is?
Yep, I started as an intern in the first week of January, and they hired me the last week of March. So it was pretty much through all of spring training.
Is that the same program that you guys do? Obviously, Mike from the connection here with Exos. Is that the same program that he did? And then also more recently, I just saw Derek posted another one as well.
Yeah, it is the same program. So we take interns all throughout the year. It just kind of depends. We do a big application at the end of the year, like now, and then we take people on throughout the year after we interview them and bring them into the facility sometimes. So pretty similar. I think it's a really cool experience. Again, I learned a ton about myself. It's very self-driven. From my collegiate experience and other experiences I had before, there's a lot of things layered out. You're going to do things this way, and this is the continuing education you're going to do. It was kind of a good last internship for me because you get out of it what you put into it. So whatever questions you have or whatever you're digging on, it's on you. Take that to people and become part of the team. I think it's a really cool, challenging opportunity.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we've talked about this, but when Mike was kind of looking to get in, I had told him like the reputation that the Diamondbacks have for developing their staff and their emphasis on continuing education. From the people that I know that have worked over there, the reputation is just really, really good. And I told him like if he can get a chance to get over there, it would be really beneficial for him early in his career to kind of get his foot in the right, kind of going in the right direction, so to speak. And it sounds like he has taken the path that you originally took. And now I'm curious, like that you're full-time one, do you have some say in the development of the interns or who gets hired? And then two, like being on the other side of that, how do you go about helping those interns? Or do you just take a hands-off approach and be like, listen, I kind of learned it my way, like you kind of got to learn it your way too?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was an interesting situation. So I worked with Mike this summer, and he did a great job for us. We had a couple other interns with us as well. So it was, all of it was a shared responsibility. Derek, our coordinator, and Nate, our assistant coordinator, along with Harmon, our other strength coach at the complex, we all took that job on as a team. And, from my experience, I just tried to keep the heart of it, which was, it is self-driven, and you got to figure certain things out for yourself, and you've got to push, and no one's going to hold your hand. But, try to structure some continuing education things in there every week, our basic principles that I think would help speed along their development. And I think he was able to get a lot out of it. But I think that's the cool thing about it. It just depends where you are as a coach and a person. And I think we kind of tailor that internship to what your needs are and things you're trying to work on, because that's one of the things I really value about what we do as a staff and what they've done for long before I got there. Really focused on personal and professional development, and helps you get to know yourself a lot better, what I might be good at, what I need work on. And I think it just speeds up everyone's development. And at the end of the day, it helps the athlete and the team, which is the most important thing to me.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but when he was doing his internship, I kind of kept in touch with him because he had gone from interning with us to interning with you guys. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to spend a day in the big leagues with the group. And I was like, man, it took me like 5 or 6 years in the minor leagues before I spent a day in the big leagues. And you've been interning for like a month. So all of that is to say that, again, Derek just posted that one, and I'm not like trying to selflessly plug anything, but if people are trying to get their foot in the door in baseball, I have a lot of young coaches that ask me like, hey, how do I get into baseball? I personally think that's a really good opportunity for a young coach to go in, to be like totally immersed in the culture, the baseball life, and still have the opportunity to make some mistakes and understand that you are an intern, you are there to learn. And you're there to see like maybe baseball is for you, maybe it's not for you. But there's a lot of times where I think people have kind of what this vision of baseball is, and then they get in either a full-time role or a paid part-time role, and it is something totally different to them. And then they kind of have to like about face and figure out what they're going to do. Where, if you're still very early in your career and you have an opportunity to get pro sports on your resume in an organization that really does value development the way that you guys do, for me, hopefully anybody listening to this that's young applies for that. If the application process goes way up because of this, like, sorry to you guys that you have to go through that, but also like it's something that, again, I try to push younger coaches to, that I have interaction with, is just, if you can intern, if you can do it in a more formal setting, again, somewhere like with your organization. I know when I was with the Red Sox, we had 2 interns every year, but they were always from the local college. So that put a little bit of kind of a cap on who we could take. I don't know if it's the same for you guys or if it's kind of open application, but for me, that's kind of the best way to get your foot in the door, see what baseball is like without having to make all of those daily programming decisions and be, kind of at those like cutthroat meetings that sometimes happen. You're kind of just a fly on the wall for a lot of things. And then, like you said, you get out what you put in. And if you kind of take that initiative, you earn that recommendation, then all of a sudden you find yourself in a full-time spot. So sounds like you guys are doing a great job. I'm excited to see who your next batch is. And like I said the other day, I'll probably come over and visit you guys. So it's just cool what you guys are doing, man. It's really awesome. I really feel very strongly about developing the next wave of young coaches, and really honestly finding people to replace us someday when we move on. And it sounds like you guys have a really good system of doing that over there.
Yeah, I appreciate all that. I know, I can speak for myself only, but I've gotten a ton out of this. And something that, one of our older staff members told me before I started my internship, I think I asked, something along the lines of, well, what do you guys expect out of a good intern, or something along those lines? And he said, we just want you to be yourself. And I think, that's something I had never heard in an interview before. And I thought it was really cool because that was true to what I experienced. And like you said, it allowed me to make mistakes and learn. And, that's the easiest way to grow, I think. Just try not to make the same mistake twice, but you're just expected to be yourself. And I think we get a wealth of knowledge and opinions and different personalities, which helps make us great, in my opinion. So it's been really cool. And, like you said, we take interns all year long. So we're always looking for good, driven people who are willing to learn.
Yeah, it's really exhausting to try to be somebody that you are not. So that's really good advice, is just be yourself. And if people don't like who you are as yourself, you'll find somewhere that you fit in. But it's much more exhausting to try to be someone else than to just be your authentic self. So
Absolutely.
What do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing?
That's a great question too. Um, I at least early on, I find myself not polar against anything or polar for anything. On the other side, I think I could be convinced anything can work with the right athletes, and you're knowledgeable enough about whatever that program or exercise or whatever it might be. Like the only thing that I found is reading the big blue book and talking to some other mentors I've had along the way. A lot of people have told me to program back to front, so from the end of the year all the way through, just because and it makes sense in a way that you want to know where you're going and get there, right? But I don't know if it's just because of the way that our season is based or the training age of the athletes I've had the last 2 years. I find it really beneficial just to program 1 month at a time and see where the guys are at, and take on the objective data we have. I try to trust my eye and the other coaches I work with, the eye as much as possible, and then we get a well-rounded program from there. I think there's a lot of things month to month you might pick up on that you could miss if you're just programming all the way through. So I don't know if that's too radical of an opinion, but that'd be the thing that sticks out to me the most, at least.
Yeah, I think this one will depend on who's listening, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
if you're in professional baseball, it kind of makes sense that you have to kind of go month to month, especially when you're programming in season. But if you're like a college coach or I don't know, maybe a high school coach or something, like you're looking at a very long process, maybe it could be different. And I think I was probably the same when I was younger too, is just like, and I mean, I still do this, right? Like I have kind of a general outline of where I'd like things to go, and maybe some adaptations that I'm looking for in a specific period of time. But I have found that, yes, I can drastically change course like very fast. And especially in season, I can speak from my own experience. Our head guy and I would sit down at the beginning of the year. We'd have the whole calendar out for the entire season. We'd kind of try to lay out generally when we were going to have some lighter training weeks or some deload weeks based on, West Coast travel or like long road trips, or a lot of like random off days mixed in, or, we would play in like Toronto on the turf and then Tampa on the turf. So like trying to find ways to get guys off their feet while we're on those trips. And then what you end up doing is like every 3 or so weeks, he and I would kind of sit down again and be like, all right, what did we do the last month? What are we kind of looking for the next month? And does it align with our original plan? And if not, it's okay. You have to pivot so much. And I think the general overarching theme is the adaptability piece, right? Like more than anything that I have talked to other people about is that professional baseball requires so much adaptability from you on a day-to-day, on a week-to-week, on a month-to-month, on a season-to-season. It's just things can change like that. I mean, the playoffs started yesterday, they had a doubleheader to determine who was going, right? And it could have been as crazy as if one team sweeps, the Diamondbacks are in. If they split the games, the Diamondbacks are out. You have to be prepared for that either way. And I think baseball really teaches you that. And I think that's, again, we talk about like if you can get your foot in the door with baseball, like there's really no better place to learn that, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I didn't necessarily think about the travel aspect of it is complex. We have a 30-minute to an hour road trip, and then we're at the game, we go home after. But being somewhere for a whole week, I could see how that, you might want something less structured or more structured based on your programming, just depending on who you are. So it's actually a good point I didn't think about.
Yeah, you'll find once you move up that there's just that many more variables, and you just end up learning to adapt with them that much more. And then all of a sudden it's like second nature to you. And then if you go somewhere else, even if you're like in the real world after the regular season, like somebody throws a wrench in the plans, you're just like, okay. Where other people are like, I don't know what's going on with it. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's just part of life. It's just expected at this point. Like you almost get suspicious when things go too smoothly. And you're like, all right, when is something going to hit the fan here? When is something?
Yeah.
And then you get a rain out, and then you have, a doubleheader the next day, and then you have a getaway on that doubleheader, and then you're like, all right, well, there goes our training plan. Like there was the wrench we were looking for.
Yeah. Adaptability is huge. For sure.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. And then in terms of like maybe specifically for you, you mentioned programming, and we can get into the complex a little bit more here in a second. But as a general overarching thing for the Diamondbacks organization, if you don't mind, can you speak on like, is there a universal program that comes all the way through? Are you kind of free to do your own programming at each affiliate? Are there just some general pillars that you're looking to hit? Like, how does that all play out in the big picture of your organization, if you can speak on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is it's really cool that we do have freedom to program from complex all the way through. There are some parameters that we stay in, some exercises and certain movement patterns we try to stay away from, but I think that's important when we're all in the same place in spring training or in the off season, whenever we have time to talk and meet and go over our philosophy and things we've added and things we might subtract, that we're all on the same page about, what are the main things we're trying to accomplish, or what are some things we try to stay away from. We have a wealth of experience from the big leagues, obviously, all the way down. So listening to some people that have done this before and have seen what has worked and what has not worked in practice, I think as long as us younger staff members listen to that and ask good questions and talk about our programs with other staff members, I think, we have a lot of freedom to do what we think is best for the athletes. Just important that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I'm sure it helps that you have Derek around and some others that have kind of been there, done that, seen that. And then, it's kind of an interesting thing in baseball right now, but I know there's a lot that comes out from you guys specifically with like water bags and the quote unquote like performance training. Like, how much of that is going on in maybe specifically in your position in the complex? And then how much of that program wise is coming from the strength coaches versus the baseball staff? Like, is there a collaboration amongst all of you? Like, what does that kind of look like for you specifically in the complex?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I really value and think is cool about our strength staff in particular is we've got people with a diversity of opinions and backgrounds. Like, I don't know if I would say I'm a little more collegiate based just on the way that I interned and was brought up, and a mix of that and Cressy. We have another Cressy guy that programs similar. We have a guy that's more of a water bag guy and skill acquisition that's very different. We have some guys that are more biomechanics based, Bill Hartman and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different programming philosophies that we all use and we can all program, like I said, but again, just trying to make sure we're on the same page, know what everyone's doing, and we all have an understanding of what's going on level to level. I think as far as the skill acquisition and the rest of that goes, I think that's kind of up to you as a coach and the relationships you build with your coaching staff. I know this year I did a little more of that just because I went to the Florida Baseball Armory Conference last October. That was a really valuable continuing education thing for me to see because it helped me understand movement and mechanics a little better than I did before. So I was more comfortable having those conversations with the coach. For me, I probably let the coaches come to me first. I like having conversations about guys, but we're working on a pitcher, that's their realm, or a hitter, that's their realm and their job. But I always love to help. And I think one of the most valuable things we could do as strength coaches is help paint a more well-rounded picture of the athlete. So, hey, this is what you're seeing out there with the guy's pitching mechanics. I'm seeing this on the force plates. This is how he kind of moves in the weight room. And maybe this drill or that drill would work for him. And I'm happy to blend that into his program. So the last thing he does exiting the weight room is something that will help him go into the performance part of practice, more ready to go and have a more successful day. So just to make a long story short, I think it's up to you and the relationships you build with your coaching staff and what they expect out of you as well.
Yeah, all of that makes sense to me. And I think that's probably universal across every level, or at least that's how it should be, in my opinion. And again, you guys have a reputation for having good staff development, good cohesion amongst your staffs, good collaboration, all of that. So
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 1 of this interview with Joe. I hope you enjoyed this one. It was good to hear about his journey and particularly about the internship program with the Arizona Diamondbacks. As I mentioned in the episode, if there are any young coaches listening who are trying to get into baseball and experience it, that is a great opportunity to get in, to learn, but to still have kind of that balance of not having to make all the huge decisions just yet. 3 things that I took from Joe in this episode: always try to be yourself, especially when beginning a new role. Almost any program or exercise can be effective when used in the appropriate context, and communication and collaboration amongst departments is key to helping the athlete achieve their potential. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.